I'd like to ask you about the techniques and the ways Georgia is trying to attract foreign investments to its country. As I know, the country has just introduced a film tax credit, which accounts to 20%. Talking about the foreign production companies, film production companies coming to Georgia and shooting full feature films or documentaries. The country allows up to 20% of tax rebate. If you can elaborate on that, and if you have more novelties to attract more investment, more foreign investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is an important question since Georgia's economic growth is in very strong correlation with foreign direct investments, and attracting foreign direct investments is crucially important for a country like Georgia. We have a number of government-sponsored programs in order to attract investments and generally promote the environment in the country. First of all, I would like to mention the project which is called Producing Georgia, which creates a number of incentives for local production. And all these incentives are available for international investors. We incentivize production and manufacturing through 4 special instruments. First of all, this is transferring title over the government-owned land or government-owned premises for a symbolic price under the investment obligation to launch the company in 2 years. Second, this is subsidizing bank loans so that if, for example, the bank interest rate is around 11-12%, government pays 10% for a startup period of 2 years, so that companies pay normal percentage rate only after the startup period, not to distort the competitive environment. And third is sharing collateral obligation against the commercial banks up to 50%. And fourth is financing, bringing foreign experts, like for example, if we need experts from Germany for manufacturing or for agriculture, we can finance their cost of travel and living expenses in Georgia in order to bring know-how and expertise to Georgian enterprises. You mentioned CAST in Georgia. This is a special program to incentivize movie production in Georgia, where companies are able to rebate 20% of qualified investment costs incurred in Georgia on Georgian territory, which makes it very attractive. And nowadays we have 6 foreign companies casting movies, producing movies in Georgia, and we can definitely be proud of excellent scene and the landscape in Georgia, which is very attractive, and also professionals, technical professionals on the ground that are available at a very reasonable cost. There are other projects, like in agriculture. We have Plant in Georgia program, which finances up to 90% of the investments, so that 40% of the initial investment is a grant from the government, 50% is a very favorable loan, and there is a need for only 10% of initial seed investments from the side of an investor or entrepreneur. So there are a number of projects like this, but most importantly, I would like to say that Georgia has created one of the most liberal environments in order to attract foreign direct investments. Georgia has free trade relations with all EU countries. After signing of the DCFTA agreement 2 years ago, Georgia has free trade agreements with all the neighbors, including Russia and Turkey. Georgia has free trade agreements with all the former Soviet republics, countries in Central Asia, and also we are negotiating free trade now with China. So after completing these negotiations, any company producing goods and services in Georgia will be able to sell goods in a tariff-free regime with a third of the world population, which is a great opportunity, so that Georgia can not only be considered as a 3.7 million population country, but as a country open for investments and trade for currently 1.5 billion consumers market, and again after signing with China free trade agreement, it means that there will be 1/3 of the world population consumers will be reachable by Georgian companies and enterprises. After signing of DCFTA with European Union, it has become very interesting to invest in Georgia, especially from the countries which themselves do not have free trade with European Union countries. So we have new industries and enterprises emerging in Georgia. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for your informative speech. You spoke about Georgia's European way. I would like to know in which areas do you think Georgia has to catch up in regard to the European integration? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Europeanization of Georgian institutions and legislative framework is a comprehensive process of changing legislation, institutions, human rights protection standards. So this is a complex agenda consisting of action plans of different institutions and agencies in the government, including parliament and legislative branch of the government. There are a number of areas where we have still a long way to go to reform our institutions and standards and to approximate to European standards. I can name several areas where we do have very good progress during the recent years: human rights protection, ownership rights protection, which is marked by number of international institutions and recognized progress of Georgia. There are areas where we still have, for example, the rule of law and judicial reform. We already completed 2 waves of the reforms, and the 3rd wave of the reform is already passed to the parliament, and now it is under the discussion. So there are areas where we'll need to advance, and I think that the government of Georgia takes it as the highest priority in its agenda. So we count on the support of our friendly countries like Germany, as we have sectoral cooperation in many of the areas, including reforms of Georgian institutions according to the European standards. But of course there is a room for improvement in many areas. There is a long way to go, but we have come a long way, as I said in my speech, and I think that during the last 4 years we have made enormous progress, especially, as I said, in the level of democracy, media freedom, freedom of expression, and world governance indicators published in 2015 recognize this progress in freedom of expression, absence of violence and stability, regulatory quality. But again, we don't feel that we should be self-satisfied with all these results. We need to continue these reforms. And visa liberalization, by the way, is not only visa-free travel for us. It bears enormous transformative power in order to incentivize Georgian people to continue these very ambitious goals, to very ambitious reforms, and to move towards these very ambitious goals. Thank you.
I am a student here at Germany. I have just finished my studies at Bremen, Jakobs University. And the question I want to ask, unfortunately, in my 3 years of studying here, I have only encountered negative press regarding Georgia, how Georgians are coming here and doing something bad. But in my university, for example, Georgian students for 3 consecutive years have been winning prestigious Daimler Award and getting jobs in the Daimler as successful students. Last year, Microsoft selected 5 students from my university to work in their company, one of them being Georgian. This year, Jakobs Startup Competition launched its annual competition that is the largest non-student-run competition in Germany, and a Georgian student for the first time had the most innovative idea in the history of the competition. However, my question is, why do we always hear these negative connotations about Georgia, Georgian immigrants, and there's not that much emphasis on what good the students do here? There's also a lot of artists, professors that come here and do something really valuable for German society. And my question would be, what is our answer to that? What collaboration should exist between, for example, Georgian embassy and German press to release this information that should be good for the both sides?
Thank you very much. Yes, there is a question of, I think, better communication. That is, I think we need to be more active to communicate our success. And as I look at these faces of Georgian students, I think that we need to show better sides of our society and progress that we have. In this, we already, first of all, about crime, because this has become a very hot issue in the agenda of German media, and we do see headlines about Georgian criminals. And I need to say that, first of all, we take it very seriously, because concerns of our friends and partners are very important for us. And for this, we have Minister of Interior in our delegation, and he already visited several times Germany, including different lands and local authorities, and he met with his colleague, and we have excellent new formats of cooperation tackling the problems of crime, Georgian crime in Germany. But I think to some extent these numbers and perceptions are somewhat exaggerated, because the real numbers issued by German institutions and agencies show that it's only 0.9% among all foreign criminals that goes to Georgian criminals, and this is, we are not even top 20 here. So I think we need to work harder, including in a bilateral format between our law enforcement institutions, but also to use success cases that you just listed here. And I think that we will be very active since we approach a German-Georgian Friendship Year of 2017. We plan a number of activities showing centuries of friendship and origins of German communities in Georgia 2 centuries ago, and all the success stories that both of our nations had in relations between our people. So I think it takes, it should be paid more attention, and I should admit here that we need to be more proactive in promoting Georgia as a friendly, positive country with a lot of achievements, with bright students studying in Germany, with a lot of success cases of Georgians working in German companies and highest profile corporations. So believe me, I will take it as a very important item in my next agenda, and I will be very much focused on doing this in the nearest future. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'm very glad to be here and listen to your vision about Georgia's way to Europe. It's very important, I think. But I have a question. As we know, the relationship between Georgia and Russia is not so easy. What do you think, which kind of support could be useful for Georgia from Europe, from Germany, for, to normalize, the relationship?
Thank you. We do have very difficult relations with Russia. 2 of our historic territories are occupied by Russia, and since 2008 we have Russian military bases back to Georgian soil, and we do have very difficult task to normalize these relations with a constructive approach to improve things. And since 2012, we started number of attempts of normalizing relations between Russia and Georgia through appointing special representative of Prime Minister of Georgia in Georgia-Russia relations, Mr. Zurab Abashidze, who regularly meets his colleague, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Mr. Grigori Karasin, and they discuss humanitarian and trade issues. Also, we have main format of negotiations with Russia, which is Geneva International Discussion, and you asked what can we do. Germany has a very important presidential role in OSCE, including in participation in the Geneva International Discussions. And of course, with our friends, international allies, we spent a great amount of efforts to turn these relations into possibly constructive negotiations about getting our relations into a normal track. It's not easy. It's very difficult. But again, despite the fact that in political dimensions, things remain pretty much the same, and we have borders erupted on the Georgian territory, we do believe that through re-establishing trade with Russia, through re-establishing people-to-people relations, and we still have and do see today hundreds and thousands of Russians coming back to Georgia as tourists, I think it will help us to ease the tensions, to decrease the temperature, and to allow us to talk about more serious issues, political issues. We hope very much that Russia will realize that through this pressure, they will not be able to change the strategic priorities of Georgian nation and sovereign decisions of Georgian nation to belong to European and Euro-Atlantic club. But at the same time, Georgia tries to communicate this message as much as possible to Russian politicians that Georgia does not want this membership to become stronger enemy to Russia. Georgia does want the membership. Georgia wants to build democratic country in order to create more stability at the southern borders of Russian Federation. We believe that with time it will be possible. Maybe it's not possible today, but we need to continue this constructive, consistent way of approaching these things, but to exercise, we call it strategic patience in doing these things, because it is not easy. Since we face severe violations of basic human rights on the occupied territories, ethnic Georgians are deprived of a right of Georgian language education. People living across the administrative borderline are deprived of their property rights on land. And Georgian nationals are captured from time to time, and by the way, very often, very recently, and kept in the prisons of Tskhinvali, claiming bailout money from their families. So it's not easy. It's very difficult to face all these challenges, but we should feel responsible against our nations. We cannot engage in a new military conflict, because this can ruin all our chances to become a democratic European country. So we understand and we follow this path very patiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi for University of Berlin. I just wanted to follow the previous question about Georgian students studying here in Europe, and this is one of the good things with European integration, is that there are quite many of us Georgian students studying here in Berlin and in Germany. I don't know the exact digit, but there are thousands of us, so we are quite many. So my question would be, like, how do you see the role of these students in Georgian-German relations and in Georgian-European relations in general, especially in the situation when some sources of media are trying to portray Georgians as criminals and burglars, as we have mentioned here. And more importantly, like, how do you see the roles of the students when they come back to Georgia? Because I think Georgian state should be interested to bring these people back rather than stay abroad. And what kind of perspectives do you see for them when they come back to their country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, Georgian students are, of course, cultural ambassadors of Georgia while being in Germany and studying here. But I think when you come back, and you will come back to Georgia, you will be cultural ambassadors of Germany to Georgia and advocates of Germany for Georgia, in Georgia. And I believe that resources that we have, these bright faces that we see in this audience, should be engaged in building this deep and wide partnership between Georgia and Germany. I think that we should use these resources as much as possible. We did have a very interesting conversation with Ambassador of Georgia to Germany, Mr. Vladimir Jantoria, who is, by the way, also a person who was educated in Germany and made his degree in Germany, and he was the author of the first Georgian civil code according to German principles of legislation. And I think that engaging all of you in building these strong ties between Germany and Georgia will be very important. And right after returning to Georgia after this trip, we are creating a special task force working group to focus on German-Georgian relations. And of course, one of the most important areas will be focusing on our community of our students in Germany and using all these resources. It will be very important. But also, you asked about opportunities and chances to use your potential while you return to Georgia. I think there are a number of opportunities. There are a number of new investors, corporations, European companies coming back to Georgia, and I believe that a lot of them will be looking for bright minds like here, and I believe that there will be vast opportunities. Since we have, and I think it will be very important for our audience to know that we have very ambitious reform agenda. Let me briefly speak about this agenda, since we believe that it will create and it will boost Georgia's relations, and it will enable us to make a breakthrough during the next several years. This is called a 4-point reform agenda that we believe creates a lot of opportunities for people like you also. This is about reforming education system in Georgia. First of all, this is about introducing German dual education model in Georgia's professional education. This is about reforming Georgia's higher education and introducing new criteria for financing professions that are most needed. And yesterday, our Minister of Education signed a memorandum of cooperation with his colleague, a German colleague, about cooperation in professional education sphere. And the second block of the reform is called economic set of the reforms, and we have already approved and passed through the parliament a liberalization package that abolishes profit tax from January 1st of the next year, so that only profits that will be distributed will be taxed, which means that if earnings are reinvested in new production, it will be free of tax. It also overhauls the tax administration to get rid of the Soviet legacy of freezing current accounts of the companies without court orders, so that Revenue Service will be authorized to freeze current accounts only after having a relevant court order. It also tells about the limiting time frame of the inspections by the tax inspectors. And as part of the economic reforms, we are introducing startup financing institution, which enables young, innovative entrepreneurs like students who have innovative ideas to get financing from this institution without pledging their parents' apartments as collaterals and without any relations with commercial banking sector. It will be placed in newly opened Innovation and Technology Park, which we call a Techno Park, in a very nice surrounding, just near to Tbilisi, and it will be excellent venue also for young people to meet and exchange ideas. And we have also very good equipment placed there, like 3D printers, microchip manufacturing facilities, etc., etc. So this is partially answer to your question, that young people will not only think about getting a job in the government, getting a job in the companies, but they will be able to finance their creative ideas through these reforms. Part of the economic reforms is also introducing pension system in the third quarter of the next year, which will be based on compulsory savings. And this design of the system was elaborated with the help of World Bank. And also, together with this, we are introducing new model of capital market, so that pension system will accumulate investable resources, and new model of the capital market will absorb these resources and deploy it in different industries and institutions in Georgia. So this is important second block of the reforms. Third block of the reforms is about spatial development of Georgia, which tells about advancing Georgia's infrastructure standards, and by 2020 we will finish all the main spinal highways, East-West Highway connecting Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and North-South highways connecting with the Russian-Georgian border. And all the main roads connecting main tourism destinations will be completed according to international standards. How we are going to achieve this? We are going to change the strategy of infrastructure projects, engaging more private companies in these projects, arranging more public-private partnerships, and shifting the burden of financing towards private sector. And for this, we are putting in place the right framework for public-private partnerships with the help of EBRD, and of course, we are working very closely with other international financial institutions. And fourth block of the reforms is a governance reform to make government more service-oriented and to make the governance process itself more inclusive, so that we will have unified front office of the whole government, so that every individual or company will be able to go to one physical space to get all services from the government, services from Ministry of Economy, like services for state property management, getting licenses for mineral resources, getting construction permits for hydropower plants, getting financing from sovereign fund, which is called Partnership Fund in Georgia. And of course, these reforms entail important optimization in the structures of government. And we have already started preparing for these reforms before the elections, so that after the elections, with the new level of legitimization, we will launch these important, ambitious reforms. And we are also creating, with the help of Estonian experts, who are, by the way, one of the best in the world in e-governance, digital space, to provide all these listed services in digital space. So this is a revolutionary reform, by the way. I don't know any other country who provides all these services under one platform, one-stop shop solution. Together with this, as part of the governance reform, is making the governance process more inclusive, which means that we are making all our decisions known to the business community through a platform which is called Investor Council, where we have EBRD, World Bank, IFC, Asian Development Bank, European Investment Bank, and local business associations like, for example, EU-Georgia Business Association, American Chamber of Commerce, International Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Business Association, sitting at the same table together with the ministers representing economic bloc of the cabinet, where I am chairman of this council, and we discuss all the important reforms and changes to legislation, institutional changes, up front before introducing them. It creates predictability, it excludes the chance that there are any negative surprises to the business community, and of course, it makes governance process more inclusive. And also, from the very first day of my tenure as a Prime Minister, I started meetings with opposition parties, including with non-parliamentary opposition and with NGO leaders and civil society to engage the whole population of Georgia in decision-making so that everyone in Georgia feels as an important stakeholder in this very important process of transforming the country into a truly European state. So these reforms, of course, create a very solid ground for more investments, for more jobs and more opportunities for students like in this audience. Thank you.
I'm a researcher and I work on migration and health. Visa liberalization is still about migration because I believe that many Georgians who live and work, some of them undocumented in other European countries, will return back to Georgia. So my question is, one question is about this preparedness of Georgia to meet them and to create a condition for them in their home country. And the second question is, we believe that Georgia will pass exam on elections. There are recently in many countries, not only in Georgia, the process which is called feminization of migration. Can you elaborate on the recent change in this term in Georgia? Because Georgia is preparing for elections and it's very interesting how Georgia will meet this process. Thank you.
First of all, Georgia signed Istanbul Declaration, and we are going to ratify this declaration. And we are for having more women in our parliament and in government too. I am sorry that I had to replace a female minister just very recently by a new minister who happened to be man, but I think that overall, and we will prove it in the election list during October elections, that we will have more women in our election list. And we are working to create some higher proportions of female participation in Georgia's political life. But also, you said about migration and the visa freeze about migration. Well, I think that everything just listed by me, all the reforms, all the changes that we are making in our Georgian life, in Georgia's institutions, will create very excellent opportunities for everybody, and creates also stability in Georgia to attract more investments, to have more job places. We aim at having from 7 to 8% growth during the next several years. And I believe that it will be possible to achieve. And if we achieve this goal, I think there will be vast opportunities, not only for Georgians living abroad, but I think there will be vast opportunities for a new additional labor force in Georgia. And I think this is partially also a challenge for us in order to prepare our education system, in order to face these challenges, in order to prepare for significant capital inflow. And we have discussed it with Minister of Education. He has very interesting plans to put important education programs in place in order to adjust Georgia's local labor force to the new requirements. Thank you.
In Georgia, we don't have any kind of international scientific institutions like Goethe Institute or Institut Français. Do you have any plans to change the situation in Georgia, to build some kind of institutions in the foreign countries? Thank you.
I think that, first of all, having Goethe Institute in Georgia is great. Just several days ago, my 9-year-old son participated in a German language performance, and I have a very nice video. Unfortunately, I cannot attend personally because of my schedule, but more and more people in Georgia are interested to learn German language. And German language has become, I think, second popular right now after English language, since Russian language is probably not the second language in Georgia. And I think that more and more people are interested to get education in German language. We have allocated a land parcel just very recently for a German school to be built in Georgia, and I think that after this school is built, and this is a large, this is a project of building large German language school in Georgia, there will be broader base for kids who want to study and get education in German language. Maybe we will need to think about establishing special institute of German culture in Georgia. We need to think about it, maybe together with all of you, because people who, Georgian students who will return to Georgia after this very interesting experience can have such bright ideas, and of course government will do our part in order to promote these kind of the ideas. Thank you. But maybe it's also appropriate to speak about establishing Georgian Cultural Center here at this university, and government of Georgia can share also the investments and expenses of such kind of a cultural center to show Georgia from positive angles and to show ancient culture of Georgia and importance of these ties between German and Georgian communities and cultures. Thank you.